You're listening to Retail Disrupted, a podcast that explores the latest industry developments and the trends that will shape how we shop in the future. I'm your host, Natalie Berg. How can businesses start building and deploying AI to drive efficiencies? What risks or threats need to be considered? How quickly can value be created? These are the questions that Lisa Weaver-Lambert answers in her new book, The AI Value Playbook. Lisa is a respected business leader, having worked for Microsoft, Accenture, and in private capital. I am thrilled that she is joining us on the show today to tell us all about her new book and how she sees AI impacting retail. First up, though, I'm going to be bringing you a conversation I had with Richard Lim, who I know many of you know. He's the CEO of Retail Economics. He's been on the show before. And if you haven't caught him on the podcast, I'm sure you've probably heard him on the BBC, on Radio 4. Richard and I caught up in Westminster last week at a breakfast roundtable event that was hosted by FreedomPay and Dynatrace. Retail Economics was commissioned to conduct some research on payment resilience and specifically the cost of payment outages. And that can be anything from a power failure to a cyber attack. I also wrote a blog post about this, which I'll share in the show notes if anyone's interested. For now, here is Richard telling us how these outages are costing UK retail and hospitality businesses around £1.6 billion every year.
I think the reality is that over the last couple of years, whether it's electricity blackouts, cyber attacks, internet downtime, payment terminal failures, it's just that businesses are shifting much more of their priority towards payment resilience. And so when we set out to do this research, it was really trying to quantify the impact of payment disruptions and how much that actually cost the industry. So as you've already pointed out, we did this piece of research. It's £1.6 billion that's costing retail, leisure, hospitality businesses every year. The largest chunk of that is actually retail. So about 1.1 billion of that 1.6 is for retail. And this can be a number of different things. Could be internet failure, it could be electricity blackouts, it could be POS system failure. So there's a lot of different factors that could be that point of weakness, point of failure. But 1.6 billion is a big figure.
It is. And when these outages occur, I guess for many of us today as consumers, we're not carrying cash. We're certainly not carrying cash. We might not even be carrying physical cards. And I think that was an interesting takeaway from the roundtable discussion this morning. And I know you asked everybody who here has £20 or more in your wallet, and nobody raised their hand. So what does that tell us? What happens then when these outages occur from a consumer's perspective?
Their expectations are high. They expect that if there are issues with payments, then they're not carrying cash with them. So there needs to be an alternative solution in order to be able to pay for things and being able to walk out the shop with the goods that the goods that you want. So from a retail perspective, if cash payments is your backup system to something that's gone wrong with a POS system, something like that, the reality is that consumers are not carrying cash. And so I kind of asked the round table this morning, about 20 people, no one put their hands up. I'm definitely one of those 20. And to your point, I rarely carry a wallet around anymore. It's just everything's done from my mobile phone. So the tactics and strategies that retailers and hospitality businesses need to adopt is one that mirrors the reality of how consumers shop today.
Yeah, which is increasingly digitally. You mentioned that there is this magic 6-minute window. So tell us a little bit more about what happens after 6 minutes from a consumer tolerance perspective.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So part of the research really honed in on how long consumers are prepared to wait if there is some kind of payment failure. And so what we found is that after about 6 minutes, consumers are leaving in droves. They are not prepared to wait longer than that. And there's this kind of window of between 7 and 11 minutes where there's a steep kind of curve of where people are just giving up, abandoning their baskets, abandoning their purchases and leaving the store. So actually at that point between 7 and 11 minutes, the industry is losing about £73 million a minute if there is payment failure, and then between 12 and 22 minutes, about 75% of that 1.6 billion that we mentioned before is already lost. So consumers are impatient, they are intolerant of bad experiences, and if retailers, hospitality businesses can't get it right, then consumers will vote with their feet and go elsewhere.
Yeah, and I guess if the outage is isolated, if it's just a specific retail outlet, then of course the obvious consequence is that consumers will go to the shops next door, to a competitor. So there's that direct loss of sale. But there's also the indirect costs of these power outages. You talked about the erosion of consumer trust, and we also heard from Alison Hutchinson of Pennies, who talked about the impact on charitable donations at the till, and also the impact on retail staff, because if consumers are unhappy, they're disgruntled, their payment isn't going through, especially in a retail setting where you just want to get the product and walk out with it, they might unfortunately take that out on retail staff.
From a brand perspective, of course, there is brand damage, and so while there's a financial cost implication in terms of people will shift their spending to other retailers who can take payments, there is a brand reputational damage point. And if the longer consumers wait, the more damage there is to a brand. So that's from that perspective, the damage is a lot more than just financial. Is that the brand perception point? I think the societal impact again is a really, really important consideration for the wider impact, and so whether or not it's consumers that are getting frustrated at that point of purchase, and it's been widely reported about verbal abuse to retail staff, or even physical abuse to retail staff, and we've had anecdotal stories of where payments can't be taken, and some consumers taking it on members of staff. So that's really an undesirable consequence of these types of things.
And that came up in the roundtable discussion as well, didn't it? That even in hospitality, if it's a busy pub on a Friday night and everybody's queuing up trying to get a beer, then that's a different story, isn't it? So it's ultimately about knowing who the customer is and what that specific mission is as well.
Absolutely. And loads of nuances within this as well. If you finished your meal, then you might be prepared to wait around for a bit longer time over a glass of wine, waiting for your payments to come back online. But if it's a distressed purchase, or if it's a food on the go purchase, then obviously speed is of the essence. And if retailers, hospitality businesses can't react fast enough, then they're going to lose those sales. And the other thing is, depending on where the business sits as well. If you're serving food, there's a shelf life, and if you can't serve that food quickly enough, or there's a blackout and electricity is lost, then that has consequences for heated food or chilled food. So depending on where your business sits in the market and who your customers are.
We heard from one of the merchants in the room that in those instances, it's probably best just to give the food away. If it's going to go bad, if there's nothing you can do, at least then you won't lose that trust. You'll earn some of that back from the customer, and that understanding that this is out of our control. But look, we're not going to let this food go to waste. So I think, and we've certainly seen it with M&S and how they've handled the cyber attack. Transparency and just keeping your customers in the loop, keeping those lines of communication open is really critical when managing these types of crises.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, fantastic. Richard, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Natalie. Cheers.
Now let's hear from Lisa Weaver-Lambert on her new book, The AI Value Playbook. Lisa, welcome to the podcast. It's so great to have you here to talk about your book, The AI Value Playbook. Before we come on to that, though, let's start with some intros. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your journey into AI?
Firstly, thank you, Natalie, for having me on. It's such a pleasure to meet you and have this conversation. So I'm from Oxford in the UK. I've lived and worked across Europe, the US, and Asia. I cut my teeth in retail financial services. I did a lot of work early on in my career in data quality, governance. It was a great discipline to learn. And I moved to the US also early on in my career, where I was lucky enough to experience the value of large data sets and how you can use analytics to solve real world problems. And my professional experience has really been developed in enterprise technology companies. I've worked for Microsoft, Accenture, and in private equity and infrastructure. In addition, I've held executive line management positions for leading brands, also in retail, including Harrods, Yoox, Net-a-Porter, John Lewis, Virgin, Coca-Cola. And I've also served on boards. I've served on the board of City College Capital Group, and I currently serve on the advisory board of Luminalta, which is a custom software company which works a lot with private equity.
Well, it's such a pleasure to have you here. I know it's taken us a few months to kind of nail down a date, but it's really great to connect. And we're going to talk about all things AI today. And let's start with your book. So, the University of Oxford described your book as a powerful guide to help companies master AI concepts, overcome the inevitable obstacles, and learn from real world examples of applied AI. Sounds so fascinating. Tell us more about it. What led you to write it, and what did you set out to achieve?
So, firstly, I'm passionate about leveraging technology to create impactful solutions. And in doing this book, I interviewed over 30 leaders in the domain across geographies and industries. And my personal mission is really to equip non technical leaders with the knowledge and confidence to leverage AI in their organizations. I was really struck by the difference between working for a company like Microsoft compared to non tech firms, because in the real world, things do get messy and complicated. And there's also an AI paradox that I noticed. And despite the sort of widespread noise and the sort of adoption of AI, its actual impact on productivity growth has been slow. And history teaches us that there are inherent delays with any transformative technology until the technology impacts larger sectors of the economy. And retail is just one of those large sectors. So the big difference is, and you wrote a book on Amazon as well, so you'll know that the big tech giants have been built bottom up with data as their bedrock and with AI integrated into core processes for nearly a decade. And technological innovation is also intrinsic to their business models and growth strategies. And they face few of the cash, storage, resource challenges common to others. So there is actually a paradox which was coined by Robert Solow in 1987 called the Solow paradox, which claims that you may see innovation and technology everywhere, but innovation does take time to have an impact on productivity. So, this paradox that he noted in the 80s was resolved in the 90s when large sectors of the economy, such as retail and wholesale, finally adopted technologies such as service architectures and ERP systems. And this really changed the business processes, particularly in supply chain and distribution centers, leading to noticeable gains in productivity. So, as cost and access are no longer large obstacles, the sort of systematic challenge that lies ahead is really developing AI capabilities within organizations and really strengthening that integration muscle. And that is a process that demands time and commitment.
Yeah, and in such a fast moving space as well, isn't it? Because, every day it feels like there is a new announcement or a new AI feature. I mean, especially within retail, because you've got both the operational efficiency side and you've got the customer facing side, which we'll come on to in a little bit. But I can imagine that writing a book about a topic like AI, I mean, you probably had to write it pretty quickly for it to be relevant by the time you published it. So, how did you find that process?
Yes, so I did it really as fast as I could, but I was also looking for the longer term practices to pass on to leaders. So there's a big distinction in the companies that I interviewed. The biggest difference is really between the cloud native companies that are sort of 6, 7 years old, that are more agile and more focused with a single pursuit. And the established companies, the innovation is really outpacing them. So there's more coming out than they are absorbing.
That is the challenge, I guess, with all of this new technology. You want to be at the forefront, you want to be leading, because if you're not, your competitors will, and it customers will notice. But at the same time, there are legal constraints, there are ethical constraints, and you do need to take your time making sure you get those right. I want to talk a little bit more about AI in retail specifically. So I was in Germany at an Amazon event where they unveiled all kinds of interesting AI and innovations. They've got a new robot that has a sense of touch for the first time. So there was a lot of talk around physical AI. I released a podcast about it recently as well. So one of the execs I spoke to reminded me of something that their CEO, Andy Jassy, had said in the latest shareholder letter, which is that AI is a once in a lifetime reinvention of everything we know. Lisa, what are your thoughts on this? Do you see AI fundamentally rewriting the rules of retail?
I do, but I also think that we need to break that down because, as I said, it was really fascinating to find the strength and agility of these newer companies and their ability to pivot as well. I've seen those new companies pivot from making mistakes to really developing some leading edge AI agents. And that pivot in a more traditional company is just more it's just much more complex because of the legacy technology they have as well. So, um, look, overall, retail industry has traditionally relied on large data sets to shape marketing strategies and product offerings. However, this generative AI takes it further by enabling them to generate hyper personalized recommendations, engage with customers proactively. You're even talking about in a tactile sense as well, and streamline back office operations. And I think its importance lies in how it helps retailers improve the speed, the accuracy, and the relevance of customer interactions while also optimizing costs. And I think as customer expectations shift towards personalized and seamless interactions, generative AI providers and the tools will deliver these experiences at scale. But I don't think we're seeing these experiences at scale yet. This is all interesting innovation, but I think some of the core challenges around retail, such as actually knowing your customer or customer loyalty or store efficiency or automation and safety and resilience of the supply chain. These facets of retail will be dealt with differently with AI, but I think it is a gradual process rather than tomorrow we're going to be doing something completely different.
Yeah. And I guess, with any emerging technology, there is always an element of skepticism. If you went to a retail event 3 years ago, all you would hear about would be the metaverse. And no one is talking about the metaverse now. So I don't put AI in the same bucket as the metaverse. Just to be super clear, AI is solving genuine problems. It's addressing genuine pain points for retailers and customers alike. Things that seemed like fantasy or that weren't possible just a few years ago are now possible. And so it's a really exciting time. And I feel like we're only starting to scratch the surface. So, where do you see the big use cases in retail? What's the kind of low hanging fruit for retailers?
The big transformation came with the first LLM launch from ChatGPT because of the natural language interface. That's, where you start to get lifelike voices. And now we're getting AI agents, which you referred to from your event in Germany, which are really going to disrupt the way that we interact with computers. And I think the key point here, especially from a consumer experience perspective, is really that natural language is the most intuitive UI of them all. And that's why we're seeing the incredible adoption of these LLMs. I think in the future, what we're seeing now is AI models that are able to support agents, which are intelligent digital systems able to handle interactions by making decisions and completing tasks on their own. And within a retailer, I think we're going to see a hybrid org chart where you've got human employees and you've got agent employees, and the responsibilities will be quite different in the future. So I think moving forward that is going to be quite transformational to our operating models. And there's a company, you're talking about Germany. This company is actually a German company called Cognigy. They are really well known for the transformation of Lufthansa's service, but now they have built AI agents where they've built almost a marketplace where you're able to create your own service agent. You can give it a personality, you can give it a voice, you can give it a sense of whether they're a little bit more creative or more structured as an individual, and this agent can move between other agents to solve problems that you might have in terms of booking or rebooking, etc. When the baggage handlers went on strike in March, there was very little warning about that, and their AI agent was able to handle sort of 10,000 messages in a minute. So if we take that into the world of retail, where we've had these cyber attacks in the UK, you can see parallels in terms of how these agents can be supporting.
You've just touched on so much there, and I agree with you. I think the rise of generative AI chatbots is going to be a game changer. I think the way that chatbots engage with customers now is infuriating. We know we're talking to a robot, and you just want to get to that point where you're finally transferred to a human, where you probably have to explain the whole thing all over again. It's not a great experience, but these Gen AI chatbots are a whole different ballgame. And and the whole kind of post purchase, what can you do after you've placed the order and you want to make a change? You might have chosen to have it delivered to your home, but actually decide, oh, I'm going to be near the store. Can I switch that to click and collect and pick it up on my way home? So having these AI chatbots free up call center time, free up, employee time to focus on those tasks, I think is huge. And I think the impact, as you say, on the store associate or the person working in the call center, it frees up their time. It's not replacing jobs. It's just elevating things and elevating the experience for the customer as well. So I'm personally really excited about AI in that respect. I think that's a very big use case for AI in retail.
So another area then, which is very different, Natalie, is content generation. And
Mhm.
there's a huge push for self-identity. Everybody wants things sort of tailor-made to their own culture, preferences. So one of the companies that I spoke to and researched for the book is called Deep Dub. And this is a company specializing in AI-powered localization, enabling the translation and dubbing of content that would otherwise just not be economically viable in the media industry. So um, there's an example I have here where they worked on a Danish show called Follow the Money, which is actually a mixture of Danish and Arabic, which added a whole new layer of complexity if you're talking about localization, because it's not just about language, but it's about cultural nuances. And the show had 3 seasons with 10 episodes, and each episode runs for about an hour, which totals about 1,700 minutes of content to dub. And traditionally, doing that amount of sort of 10 episodes would take sort of 18 to 14 weeks. But using an AI process, they did all the episodes in just 8 weeks. So that's 60% saving of time and a cost saving at least 30%. So, You can imagine that in a retail world where video and content is much more important, that actually using this type of platform is super important.
We've touched on how we're moving into this exciting new era of agentic AI. Chat GPT is adding more shopping features as well. There's all kinds of things happening. But what are you most excited about for the future when it comes to AI?
The baseline is all the operational efficiencies where I think we're seeing most of the gains today. Yeah. But I think where I am most excited is in the innovation around new product development, new service development, and how companies are achieving that.
Lisa, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. Before we go, if our listeners want to get a copy of your book or learn more about you, how should they do that?
If anybody wants to get in touch with me, I'm on LinkedIn. That's the best way. And my book is on Amazon, and I will share with Natalie the link, and I'll also get a discount code for listeners.
Oh, fantastic. Great. Well, I will include all of that in the show notes. So thank you so much, Lisa. It's been great having you on.
My pleasure. Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you for listening to Retail Disrupted. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support the podcast, please leave a rating or review or share it with others. It really makes a difference.